It happened at 4:23 p.m. on a Friday, broad daylight, quiet streets, and the faint smell of fresh-cut grass. I was unloading groceries when I heard my daughter scream. A sound I'll never forget. I turned just in time to see her clutching her face, stumbling backward, and the neighbor, Karen, standing across the hedge, holding a bright green toy water gun. The kind kids use for summer fun. Only this time, what dripped down my little girl's cheek wasn't water, it hissed, smoked, and burned through the sunlight. My heart stopped. That's when I realized what must be inside. When we first moved into Willow Creek, I thought I'd finally done it, found peace. The kind you chase your whole life but never quite catch. Our house sat at the end of a curved cul-de-sac lined with cherry trees and mailbox flags that all looked the same. My wife, Clara, called it our fresh start. I called it safe ground. After years working in the FBI's Chemical Analysis Division, dealing with explosions, toxins, and crime scenes, I just wanted normal. Normal smelled like Clara's cinnamon candles, looked like Lily riding her pink bike in circles, and sounded like her laughter echoing down the block. But Karen was the first crack in that calm. She lived directly across from us, a self-appointed HOA enforcer with bleach blonde hair and a smile that could slice glass. Always holding a clipboard, always watching. She'd walk the sidewalks like a warden patrolling inmates. Her voice carried over fences and lawns, "You can't leave trash bins past 8 a.m. or your daughter's chalk drawings make the pavement look messy." At first, I brushed it off. Clara told me, ignore her. Every neighborhood has one. But Karen didn't just complain, she cataloged us. She knew what time Clara watered the plants, what brand of car wax I used, and even commented once that Lily laughed too loud for this kind of neighborhood. The irony? She lived in the loudest house on the street, wind chimes, barking dog, and a teenage son whose music rattled windows. But no one said a word. Because it was Karen. She had the HOA board on speed dial. One afternoon, while I was fixing Lily's bike, Karen came over uninvited. Her perfume hit first, sharp, chemical, too strong for the sun. "You work for the government, don't you?" she asked, squinting. "Something with chemicals?" I nodded cautiously. "Forensics." She smiled tight. "So you'll understand. I'm very sensitive to toxins. Been smelling something odd from your garage lately." "It's just cleaning solvent," I told her. "Non-toxic. Lab grade." She frowned, pretending concern. "Just be careful. We wouldn't want an incident." She walked away before I could reply. But something about that word stuck, incident. After that, she escalated. We'd find our recycling bins turned over. Lily's sidewalk chalk washed away. Once, she even placed a printed HOA rulebook on our porch, highlighted, dog-eared, and underlined in red ink. "For your reference," she wrote on a sticky note. Lily, of course, didn't understand. She'd still wave at Karen, still bring her dandelions, still talk about how Mrs. Karen smells like flowers. I didn't have the heart to explain that not all smiles mean kindness. The week before it happened, Karen stopped waving. She'd stand by her rose bushes, watching us with arms crossed, muttering under her breath. One night, I saw her spraying something on her plants, her hose connected to a metal canister. The air smelled metallic, sharp, like cleaning acid. My instincts whispered to step closer, to test a sample. But Clara called me in, and I let it go. If I had walked over that night, maybe I would have seen it sooner. Maybe I would have stopped her. Maybe I would have realized that the enemy wasn't a stranger, it was the neighbor across the hedge. Because the next day, she smiled at Lily again. And that's how monsters hide, in plain sight, behind picket fences and polite greetings. Tell me where you're watching from. Karen's obsession with control didn't start with us, it just found a new target. The first time she went after my family, it was over a bird feeder. A simple wooden one Lily and I had painted together on a Saturday afternoon. 2 days later, a notice appeared on our door: unauthorized wildlife attractant. Against HOA regulations. Signed, of course, Karen Parker, HOA Vice President. Clara tried to laugh it off, but I saw the tension in her jaw. "She can't stand seeing people happy," Clara muttered. That night, I took the feeder down. Lily cried, clutching the little bag of birdseed she'd picked herself. "But Daddy, I wanted to help the birds." I kissed her forehead and said, "We'll hang it again soon, sweetheart." A week later, Karen showed up with that same syrupy smile and a clipboard. "Just keeping things safe," she said. "Some people use dangerous materials without realizing it. Paint fumes, chemical cleaners, things that can hurt children." I caught the meaning in her words. I worked daily with volatile compounds, safety was my profession. But hearing that tone, accusatory, smug, lit something in me. "You don't know what I do, Karen," I told her, voice steady. She raised an eyebrow. "I know enough. You're playing scientist in your garage. Be careful someone doesn't get burned." That word, burned, felt like a spark against my skin. After that, she began recording us. I'd catch her standing on her porch, phone angled our way. If Lily's ball rolled into her yard, she'd confiscate it. Once, she snapped, "This isn't a playground, it's a community," and slammed her door so hard her porch light flickered out. One evening, I came home to find Clara pale and shaking. She poured something on the driveway, she whispered. I stepped outside, the air smelled wrong. Bitter. Industrial. I touched the wet cement and felt the sting. I brought a sample to my lab the next morning. The pH reading was near 1.0. Acidic enough to corrode concrete over time. I went back that night and confronted her. "Whatever you're doing, stop it," I said. Karen leaned on her mailbox, smirking. "If your experiments are affecting my property, I'll defend it however I need to." I clenched my fists but kept my voice calm. "These aren't experiments. They're your lies." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You think your badge makes you untouchable? This neighborhood has rules. And I am the rules." She turned and walked away, her perfume trailing behind, a choking cloud of synthetic lilies. Clara begged me not to push it further. "You can't reason with someone like her," she said. "She'll only make it worse." She was right. 2 nights later, someone keyed my car. Deep, deliberate scratches spelling one word: toxic. After that, I kept my distance. I buried myself in work, ignoring her stares, her whispers, the passive-aggressive notes she left in our mailbox. I thought if I gave her silence, she'd lose interest. But some people feed on silence. It gives them room to grow their hate. The last time I saw her before the incident, she was watering her lawn in the fading sunset. The hose shimmered in her hand, and the light caught her sunglasses just right, reflecting crimson. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Pretty evening, isn't it?" I didn't realize it then, but she was rehearsing. Waiting for her moment. It was one of those perfect summer afternoons when the world feels harmless. The kind of day when you forget bad things can happen in daylight. The air shimmered with heat, children's laughter carried faintly from the park, and Lily was in the front yard chasing bubbles with her bear tucked under one arm. Clara had gone inside to grab lemonade, and I was halfway through unloading groceries when I heard Karen's voice. It floated across the hedge, sweet, sing-song, fake. "That's a pretty toy you've got there, Lily." I turned. Karen stood on her lawn, framed by her roses, holding a neon green super soaker. It looked absurdly out of place against her manicured perfection. I remember thinking she must be joking. The sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at, and her laughter rang sharp against it. Then came the hiss. A faint, high-pitched hiss, like soda fizzing open. A thin arc of clear liquid caught the sunlight and glittered midair before it struck Lily's cheek. The sound that followed didn't belong in this world. A wet, searing sizzle, followed by her scream, raw and broken. The smell hit me a heartbeat later, metallic, acrid, like burnt copper and bleach combined. I dropped the bag in my hands. Apples scattered across the pavement, rolling into the gutter as I ran. My pulse roared in my ears. Lily. She fell to her knees, clutching her face, sobbing. The skin already reddened, smoke curling from where the droplets landed. Karen froze. For a split second, her face was blank, then it twisted into horror, disbelief, guilt, something ugly and confused. "It was just water," she cried. "I swear, it was just water." But I knew better. I knew that smell. I'd spent years in labs, testing residues from chemical assaults, industrial accidents, crimes of hatred. I knew sulfur when I smelled it. I reached Lily, scooping her into my arms. Her small fingers clung to my shirt, trembling. The side of her bear was blackened, the plastic I melted into a glossy tear. Behind me, Karen stammered, "I didn't mean," but I didn't hear the rest. My focus tunneled on my daughter's cries, her tears mixing with the acidic residue. "Call 911. I shouted at the neighbors who stood frozen in their driveways. One woman dropped her phone in shock. Another turned away, hand over her mouth. Clara burst out of the house seconds later, her glass of lemonade shattering on the porch. She fell beside me, sobbing, whispering Lily's name over and over. The air felt thicker, charged, suffocating. The only sounds were the sprinkler's rhythm clicking from across the street and Lily's cries fading into whimpers. I looked up at Karen one last time. The water gun hung limply at her side, drops of acid dripping from its nozzle, hissing as they hit the grass. Steam rose from her perfect lawn. In that moment, I realized the truth: she hadn't lost control. She'd finally taken it. The flashing lights painted our perfect street in shades of chaos, red, blue, white, spinning across the neat fences and polished SUVs like a fever dream. I sat on the curb with Lily in my arms while paramedics worked, their gloved hands steady, voices clipped and professional. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the lingering acid, sharp and bitter in the back of my throat. Clara knelt beside us, whispering to Lily, her voice trembling. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. You're safe." But the look in her eyes said otherwise. The gauze soaked with cooling fluid turned pink where it touched the burn. A paramedic looked at me. "Sir, what was in that liquid?" "Sulfuric acid," I said without hesitation. My voice sounded strange, flat, mechanical. "Judging by the reaction." He blinked. "How can you tell?" "I'm a chemist," I said quietly. "I know that smell." Detective Ruiz arrived minutes later, tall and calm, his badge glinting in the sunlight. "We've got statements coming in," he said, crouching beside me. "That's the toy." He pointed to the melted green water gun lying a few feet away. Its reservoir still fizzed, tiny bubbles crawling along the plastic. "Bag it carefully," I told him. "Chain of custody matters." He raised an eyebrow. "You sound like you've done this before." "I have." Karen's house sat silent behind its drawn curtains. Her car was gone. Neighbors clustered at a distance, whispering, filming, pretending concern. The smell of burnt grass hung heavy, and I remember noticing how normal everything else looked. The mailboxes. The white hydrangeas. The faint hum of a lawnmower down the street. Life went on, while mine cracked open. As they loaded Lily into the ambulance, she clung to her stuffed bear, half melted, one ear missing. Her voice was small, fragile. "Daddy, it hurts." "I know, baby. I know." The doors closed, sirens wailed, and the sound tore through me. I stood there barefoot on the asphalt, hands shaking, the taste of chemicals on my tongue. The world was moving, but I wasn't. I looked at Karen's window one last time. Still closed. Still quiet. But in that silence, I heard a promise forming in my head, one I'd soon make real. That night, the house was too quiet. Hospitals have their own sounds, beeping monitors, nurses' shoes whispering against linoleum, but home was silence heavy enough to crush. Clara had fallen asleep sitting upright beside Lily's bed, her hand resting on our daughter's bandaged arm. The soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound breaking through the dark. I couldn't sleep. My hands still smelled faintly of acid, no matter how many times I scrubbed them. The faint, metallic tang clung to my skin, to my clothes, to my mind. I walked into the garage, the same space Karen had accused me of toxic experiments. My tools were still laid out neatly from that morning. Stainless steel glinting beneath the fluorescent light. It smelled of ethanol, copper, and something else now, regret. I sat at my workbench, staring at the FBI badge resting beside my coffee mug. I'd spent my entire career studying how chemicals destroy metal, evidence, flesh, and how to trace them back to their source. I'd testified in courtrooms, explaining molecular breakdowns and chain reactions, but I'd never thought I'd use that knowledge for something this personal. Every detail of the day replayed like a film I couldn't pause: Karen's smirk, the hiss, the steam, Lily's scream. And then that look in Karen's eyes, the split second she realized what she'd done but didn't stop. She didn't even drop the gun. She just stared, frozen, as if watching a science experiment unfold. I opened my lab journal, the one where I used to record test results. Instead, I wrote a single line at the top of a new page: I will find the truth. I will make her answer for it. It wasn't anger, it was focus. Cold, precise, deliberate. The kind of focus that had carried me through crime scenes where lives had already been lost. But this time, the evidence was written on my daughter's skin. Around 2 a.m., Clara stirred. Her voice was soft. "Please tell me she'll be okay." "She will," I said, though my throat ached. "And Karen?" I hesitated. "The police will handle her." But deep down, I knew the system wasn't built for people like Karen. People who weaponize civility. People who hide cruelty behind HOA letters and manicured lawns. I closed my eyes and made a silent vow, not just for justice, but for change. For every parent who'd ever trusted that safety still existed in suburbia. Outside, sprinklers clicked on automatically, spraying mist across the lawn. I smelled the faint scent of chlorine from the water and flinched. Even clean things felt dangerous now. I turned off the lights and whispered into the dark, "You'll never hurt her again, Karen. Never." Detective Ruiz showed up at our house the next morning, just as the sun broke through the haze. His cruiser sat parked in the same spot where Lily's bike usually stood. The faint scent of burnt grass still lingered in the air, a reminder of what had soaked into the soil. He was methodical, the kind of man who spoke slowly but noticed everything. A notepad in one hand, a quiet sympathy in his eyes. "We got the lab results from the toy gun," he said, flipping open his notes. "It wasn't a household cleaner. It's sulfuric acid. 30% concentration." His tone was calm, but the words cut through me. Clara gasped softly behind me. "That could've," Ruiz finished for her. "Could've been worse." He told us they'd executed a warrant that morning. Karen's garage was locked, but when they forced entry, they found several containers of the same acid, labels peeled, partially full. There was residue on her driveway too, consistent with what I'd reported weeks earlier. "She said she was cleaning her concrete," Ruiz explained, writing something down. "Claims she poured the acid in the toy gun to test a stain remover recipe she found online. said she forgot to rinse it out. I clenched my fists. She aimed it at my daughter. That's not forgetting. Ruiz nodded slowly. I believe you. But I need to prove intent. That's what'll make it stick in court. I handed him a sealed envelope. Inside were photos I'd taken, the keyed car, the complaint notes, the test results from her so-called pesticide spray. He flipped through them silently. You've been documenting all this? Old habit, I said. Evidence doesn't lie. He met my gaze, a flicker of respect there. You used to work cases, didn't you? Forensics. Toxicology. Then you know how this goes, he said. We'll build it right. By that evening, the news spread. The HOA held an emergency meeting, pretending to be shocked. But their tone said otherwise, more concern for community image than for Lily's scarred face. Clara refused to attend. I didn't blame her. At 9 p.m., Ruiz called. We've got her in custody. Assault with a deadly weapon. For the first time in days, I exhaled. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like step one in a war fought with paperwork and patience. Lily slept peacefully that night, her face bandaged, her stuffed bear beside her. I sat by the window, watching the reflection of the police lights fade from Karen's driveway. The neighborhood looked unchanged, same street lamps, same stillness, but I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Somewhere inside, I hoped the system would do what I couldn't, hold her accountable. But another part of me, the part that had seen too many cases fall apart, knew better. By the end of the week, Willow Creek was no longer quiet. News vans lined the cul-de-sac like vultures around a carcass. Their satellite dishes pointed skyward, reporters rehearsing lines with solemn faces that didn't match their hungry eyes. Suburban tragedy in Willow Creek, neighborhood feud turns toxic. That's what the headline read the next morning. I stood at the window, blinds half closed, watching strangers turn my family's pain into a soundbite. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, bitter and burnt. Clara hadn't slept, her hands trembling as she poured it. They're saying it was an accident, she whispered. An accident. Karen's attorney had spoken first. A smooth man in a navy suit with teeth too white to trust. My client believed the toy contained water, he told the cameras. She deeply regrets the incident and prays for the child's recovery. Then came the photo, Karen at church, smiling beside a charity table. Caption: Community volunteer under investigation. The internet devoured it. Half the commenters called her a monster. The other half called her a victim of FBI intimidation. They said I planted evidence. That I, the chemist, had orchestrated the whole thing to ruin her reputation. The HOA released a statement that made my stomach turn. We encourage compassion on all sides and remind residents that misunderstandings can occur. Misunderstanding. The word felt like a slap. Meanwhile, Lily's face began to heal, but her fear didn't. She refused to play outside. Even the hiss of the humidifier made her flinch. I spent nights sitting by her bed, tracing the soft sound of her breathing just to remind myself she was alive. One morning, I stepped out for the mail and found a folded note on the windshield of my car. No signature, just 4 words, "You've ruined this street." That same evening, a talk show ran a segment, HOA conflict or chemical conspiracy. They showed drone footage of our block, overlaying my FBI photo like I was the suspect. Clara cried quietly as I turned off the TV. Detective Ruiz called later, his voice low. Public opinion's messy right now. Don't engage with the press. We'll handle the rest. I'm not worried about the press, I said. I'm worried about what they're doing to her mind. He hesitated. Kids are resilient. Not all, I said. Not after this. The world outside kept spinning, people jogging, sprinklers clicking, cars passing, but our home felt trapped in amber. Still. Suspended. Branded. That night, I held Lily's hand as she slept and promised her silently that I wouldn't let her story be rewritten. Not by lawyers. Not by headlines. Not by anyone who called this just a mistake. The courthouse smelled of old paper, polished floors, and nerves. I'd been in plenty of them before, but never like this, never as the father, never as the victim. Every echoing footstep down that hallway felt heavier than the last. Clara walked beside me, her hand squeezing mine, while Lily held her teddy bear tightly to her chest, the one with the melted ear. Its faint burnt plastic smell still clung to it, a scent that now felt like part of us. Karen sat at the defense table, crisp white blouse, hair curled, expression calm. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was there to watch a PDA meeting, not her own trial. Her lawyer whispered in her ear and smiled at the cameras. The judge entered. Court is now in session. His gavel cracked through the air like thunder. The prosecutor, Daniel Hughes, stood and began. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case isn't about an accident. It's about intent, an intent born from anger, pride, and a need to control. His voice carried with quiet fire. The evidence will show that the defendant, Mrs. Karen Parker, knowingly filled a child's toy with sulfuric acid and used it against an 8-year-old girl. He held up the evidence bag, and every eye in the room followed it. Inside sat the melted neon green water gun, warped and discolored. The smell of burnt plastic still faintly escaped the sealed edges when the clerk handled it, faint but sharp. I caught it from where I sat, and my stomach turned. Witnesses took the stand one by one. A neighbor described hearing the scream. Another testified seeing Karen refill the toy at her hose minutes before it happened. The paramedic explained the burns, the urgency, the chemical's pH. When Detective Ruiz testified, his voice was even, precise. We recovered multiple containers of sulfuric acid from the defendant's garage, he said, showing photos of the shelves. Some labeled, some not. She also filed 3 HOA complaints against the victims within the past month. Karen's lawyer objected to the word victims. Overruled. Then came my turn. The bailiff guided me to the witness stand. The wood was cold beneath my palm as I took the oath. I looked briefly at Karen. She didn't flinch. State your occupation, Hughes said. I'm a forensic chemist with the FBI, I replied. And your expertise? Chemical analysis, toxic substances, and crime scene residue profiling. He nodded. And on June 14th, what did you witness? I took a breath. I saw my daughter scream after being sprayed with a toy water gun held by the defendant. The liquid caused immediate burning, smoke, and corrosion of fabric. I identified the smell as sulfuric acid. Are you certain? 100%, I said. It's a scent you never forget. I described the sound, the hiss, the steam, the way the liquid shimmered in the sunlight. Every word came slow, deliberate, measured. My voice cracked once when I mentioned Lily's scream. The jury leaned forward. Then Hughes asked softly, "What did your daughter say to you afterward?" I hesitated, then spoke the words that still haunted me. She asked me why Mrs. Karen wanted to hurt her. Silence filled the courtroom. No paper rustled, no coughs. Just that heavy, impossible quiet. When I stepped down, I caught a glimpse of one juror, a mother, maybe, wiping tears from her eyes. As Hughes closed his presentation, he said, "This wasn't a neighborhood feud gone wrong. This was a conscious act by someone who thought her rules mattered more than a child's life." He sat. The judge called for recess. As I turned to leave, Karen's eyes met mine. She didn't look sorry. She looked angry, like I had embarrassed her by surviving this. In that moment, I understood something chilling. For her, this trial wasn't about guilt or innocence. It was about control. And she was still trying to win. The next morning, the defense came armed like a magician ready for his final trick. Karen's lawyer, a slick man named Dyer, strode to the center of the courtroom with a confidence that made my stomach twist. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this was a tragic misunderstanding. My client made a mistake, a terrible one, but not a crime." He moved with theatrical precision, holding up a large cardboard box. "Exhibit 27, he announced, opening it slowly. Inside was a brand new neon green water gun, identical to the one Karen had used. "Purchased the same week," he said. "The same model. The same color." The jurors leaned in, murmuring softly. Dyer turned toward them, tone shifting to something almost tender. "Imagine, for a moment, a woman, alone, anxious, struggling with insomnia and prescribed medication, mixing cleaning products to treat her patio. She fills the wrong bottle. She forgets. It happens every day in homes across America." He walked past Karen, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "She's not a monster. She's a mother. She baked cookies for this neighborhood." He gestured toward the new water gun. "You think a person like that intentionally hurts a child? No, ladies and gentlemen. No one in this courtroom believes that." I clenched my jaw. I'd seen this act before, in hundreds of cases, when defense attorneys tried to humanize cruelty. But this time, it wasn't theory. It was my child. Then Dyer added, "And to prove her confusion, we present this, the second identical water gun. Bought the same day from the same store. The receipt confirms it." Hughes, our prosecutor, stood slowly. "Permission to inspect the evidence, Your Honor." The judge nodded. Hughes approached, his pen tapping lightly against his folder. "Just one question, Mr. Dyer. Where did your client keep this second toy?" "In her garage," Dyer said confidently. "And when was it discovered?" "Last week, during our own search." "Interesting," Hughes said. "Because the manufacturer stopped producing this model 2 months before your supposed purchase date." The courtroom shifted. Dyer froze. "That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible," Hughes said, his voice sharpening. "You see, I checked the batch serial number." He turned toward the jury, holding up the gun. "This isn't from the same batch. It's newer. It was bought last week, after the incident, not before." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen's composure cracked. Her hand trembled. Hughes continued, voice low and cutting. "So either your client lied about owning it beforehand, or she went out of her way to purchase a duplicate, hoping to confuse you all into thinking this was a harmless mistake." Dyer objected, his voice rising. "Speculation." "Withdrawn," Hughes said coolly. "Let the evidence speak for itself." The judge's gavel slammed once, echoing through the room. I watched Karen's eyes flicker, panic blooming behind the mask. For a moment, I saw her for what she really was, not a confused neighbor, not a victim of circumstance, but someone who had planned, concealed, and lied. The jury saw it too. You could feel the shift, the invisible line between doubt and belief breaking clean in half. Karen whispered something to her lawyer, but he didn't answer. He just stared at the fake toy, as if realizing too late that his entire case had just melted away. And in that silence, I heard it, the faint squeak of Lily's bear in her hands as she squeezed it tightly from her seat behind me. A small sound, but powerful enough to fill the room. That was the moment the truth finally won. Verdict day felt like waiting for a storm to choose where it wanted to strike. The courthouse buzzed with whispers and fluorescent hums, that low nervous murmur of people who pretend justice is predictable. I sat at the front with Clara's hand locked in mine, Lily between us, clutching her bear so tightly her knuckles turned white. Across the aisle, Karen looked immaculate again, fresh curls, pale lipstick, as if the trial itself hadn't scraped the truth raw. The judge entered, his robe catching the light. Everyone rose. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of his footsteps. On the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, the clerk read, "We find the defendant guilty." The air left the room in a single shared breath. But before relief could bloom, the second part landed like a hammer. On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant not guilty. That single word, not, hung there, heavy and poisonous. Karen exhaled softly, like she'd just won a game. Clara's hand slipped from mine, trembling. Lily looked up at me, confused. "Daddy, does that mean she's going home?" "No," I whispered. But even as I said it, my throat tightened. The judge sentenced her to 6 years. With good behavior, she'd be out in 4. 4 years, for what she took from us. 4 years for the fear Lily would carry the rest of her life. Karen didn't cry. She just stared ahead, jaw tight, like someone being mildly inconvenienced. When the bailiff cuffed her, she looked at me once, only once, and for a fraction of a second, I thought I saw pride. Not remorse. Pride. When she was led away, the room erupted in whispers. Cameras flashed, reporters barked questions. "Mr. Miller, do you feel justice was served?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth was, it hadn't been. Outside, the air was cold, rain just beginning to fall. The drops hit the pavement like static, each one hissing faintly against the hot asphalt. It sounded too much like that day, the hiss, the burn, the scream. Clara stood beside me under a shared umbrella, her face unreadable. "It's over," she said softly. "No," I replied. "It's never over. Not for her. Not for us." That night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat alone in the garage again. The smell of oil and metal surrounded me, comforting and cruel. My mind wandered to dark places. I imagined driving to the prison years from now, looking her in the eye, and asking if she remembered what she'd done. But then I thought of Lily's laughter when she was little. Her chalk drawings, her innocence. And I realized revenge would only make me what Karen already was, someone who let hate define their world. So instead, I opened my notebook and wrote one line beneath my earlier vow: "Justice isn't what the court says, it's what we build after." 6 months later, the seasons shifted. The air in Willow Creek smelled different now, cleaner, quieter, but emptier too. The cherry trees that once lined the street dropped their leaves early, and Karen's house sat dark behind drawn blinds, a for sale sign leaning crooked in her yard. Sometimes I'd catch new buyers driving slowly past, staring at it before moving on. The house had become a scar. Just like us. Lily was healing. The burns had faded to pale marks, soft against her skin, reminders but not disfigurements. Her laughter was coming back in pieces, small, cautious bursts that filled the house like sunlight through blinds. She'd started painting again too, this time on canvas instead of sidewalks. "It lasts longer this way," she told me. One morning, as I walked past her room, I heard her humming while drawing. I stopped. The smell of acrylic paint drifted through the door, sweet, sharp, alive. On her easel was a picture of a green water gun, half melting, surrounded by wildflowers. Above it, in blue paint, she'd written, "Never again." That same week, Clara and I launched Lily's Law Foundation. We started small, just local talks at schools, community centers, and parent workshops. My voice trembled the first time I spoke into a microphone. "Household chemicals can destroy lives," I said, holding up a sealed bottle of drain cleaner. "But ignorance isn't an excuse, it's a weapon waiting to be used." We taught families how to store acids, how to identify danger labels, how to report suspicious misuse. The crowd listened in silence, their faces lit by the pale glow of the projector screen showing Lily's story. Not the gory details, just the truth. A neighborhood, a toy, a moment. Our story spread. News anchors called it reform born from tragedy. Politicians reached out. Within a year, Lily's Law passed in our state, requiring chemical vendors to track and verify sales of corrosive materials. It wasn't revenge. It was responsibility. Sometimes I'd still see the green glint of a water gun at the store and feel my pulse quicken. The smell of bleach or the hiss of a spray bottle could send me back to that day in an instant. But I learned to breathe through it. Healing isn't erasing what happened, it's learning to live beside it. One evening, near sunset, Lily and I stood in the yard together. She held her chalk again for the first time since that day. The pavement was warm under our feet. "Can I draw something?" she asked. "Anything you want," I said. She knelt down, the faint scrape of chalk echoing softly. When she finished, I saw what she'd made, a heart, big and uneven, with a single word in the center, safe. I couldn't speak. I just crouched beside her, the orange sky fading into gold. Somewhere in the distance, a sprinkler hissed, but it didn't scare her this time. She looked up and smiled, the last of the sunlight catching her eyes. That's when I knew. We'd been broken, yes, but not ruined. I stood, looking across the quiet street toward the empty house that had started it all. The wind rustled the for sale sign. The world moved on. But our mission stayed. Because justice doesn't end with a verdict. It begins with the people who refuse to look away. If you believe safety should never be optional, subscribe, and stand with us. Let's make sure no family ever learns the hard way what Lily's Law truly means. Would you have forgiven her? Do you think Lily's Law should exist everywhere? What moment hit you hardest in this story?